Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to Conversations and Connections. I'm your host, Sandy McGregor. I'm so excited that you are here to join us today. We have a wonderful, incredible guest that I cannot wait to introduce you to. You're going to learn so much more about her, her journey, her love for Jesus, and her heart's desire to honor him and to serve you by teaching you about what she's been learning through all of the journeys that God has given her in her life. So I want to introduce you today to Katie Davis Majors. So hi, Katie. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. The first time, you may not remember, but we met at the Loved Already conference. There were
Okay,
so
yeah.
many people lined up for your books. But I said to my girls, I'm like, I'm going over to meet Katie. I'm going to get a book. She's going to sign it. So, yeah, that was a great conference.
It was,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that was Tori's first. And I think there's the next one's coming up,
Huh?
but we can't go this year, unfortunately.
Oh, bummer.
Yeah, missed out because it was fun because I met my sister there. So
Sweet.
kind of met in the middle, but yeah, it was a wonderful time. So yeah, that was a great opportunity to hear you speak because I never hear you speak before. So that was a real joy to be there with you that day. So thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I will just introduce you to our listeners today. For those that don't know you, by the end, they definitely will. So, Katie, you are a wife to Benji and to your 15 favorite humans. You love Jesus and sharing what he's teaching you in the mundane minutes of ordinary life. Whether in Uganda, America, or somewhere in between, you and your family invest in the lives of discipling people that God puts in your path, which I just love so much. You are the founder of an amazing ministry called Amazima Ministries, author to some incredible books, New York Best Time selling, Kisses from Katie, Daring to Hope. And we're going to talk a little bit more today about, we have Safe All Along with me today, and then the devotional, Our Faithful God. So you have been a very busy writer.
Yes, on top of other things. I never know how a book gets done. I'm like, thank you, Lord, you did that.
Honestly, it really does come down to that. And that's what I love about reading through your books, because I just understand that you're a mom, you're a wife, and you've got these children and you have this ministry, but yet during the ordinary mundane and that you talk about very obviously from chopping vegetables to folding laundry, this is who you are. You are a servant of Christ. So thank you again for being with us today. So let's start with a little bit about, we won't get into too much detail about the first two books, Kisses from Katie and Daring to Hope, because that really, I encourage you as listeners you need to get hold of those books. They really go into the in-depth journey of your life from leaving the States and heading to Uganda. So my books are not here with me. They're actually up at our cottage at the lake. And I'm telling you, the Kisses from Katie one is probably double inside because if it rains or if I leave it out, it's very funny. So it's one of those books that everybody knows I love to read or have read before. So I don't have
Thank
those with me today to show everybody, but I'll put links in the bio and stuff like that for below. So let me just start by asking you about Uganda, and can you just give us a glimpse into what led you to Uganda initially?
Yeah. I grew up in a family that was really big on serving others. I feel like that was a priority in our family throughout my whole childhood. My parents were super involved in our church, super involved in our community,
Mhm.
very kind people, always doing stuff for other people. So I would say that that was like really just I saw that modeled for me as a child. And it's interesting the older I get and the more I parent, the more grateful I am for my own parents and just the example they set for me in
I
that.
completely agree.
Our family also traveled a fair
Mhm.
amount, so they really instilled in me just a love for different kinds of people and different
Yeah.
cultures and different foods. And so my mom and I had been talking for a while about going on an international mission trip. We'd done some like mission opportunities in and around the United States, but never
Yeah.
overseas. And originally we had wanted to go on a trip with our church over Christmas break, but it
Mhm.
didn't quite fill up. So the church wasn't going to take the trip
Yeah.
anymore. I was like, oh, mom, I still want to go
Yeah.
somewhere. And so we found an organization in Uganda, which was, a place that we had never even really heard of or seen on a map before. And my brave mom was willing to go with
Wow.
me.
She's
So
brave. I love it.
she really is. She's so brave. We talk about it all the time,
Yeah.
just how like God just gives you what you need when you like can't see that you need it.
100%.
right? And just we laugh and are just like, why
Yeah.
did you do that? How did you do that? How did you let us just go to this place we'd never been? And she's like, I really don't know.
Honestly, it's those crazy yeses that God's
Yeah.
just going, they're listening and they're doing it.
Yes. Yeah. So we went and we volunteered at an orphanage for
Mhm.
3 weeks.
Mhm.
And I just loved it. I was just kind of enamored by the people, the culture, the sunshine. Uganda's on the equator. It's a beautiful, beautiful country,
Mhm.
just like physically beautiful, but also just like beautifully kind and
Mhm.
hospitable people. And so I really just fell in love during that 3 week trip. While I was there, I met another couple who was running a different orphanage that was a bit further out. It was a bit
Mhm.
more rural in a much more impoverished community.
Okay.
It was Ugandan pastor and his wife. They were running this organization, and he actually invited me. He said, "Would you like to come back? You can
Wow.
stay with my wife and I. We just love your help serving in the orphanage." And
Mhm.
I was a senior in high school, so originally I said, "Oh no, like
Yeah.
thank you so much. I'm gonna go home, go to college, and
Yeah.
kind
Got
of be on this
plans.
normal trajectory, right?" But man, when I came back to the United States, all I could think about was how to get back to
Mhm.
Uganda. And all I could think about was this invitation to go and
Right.
serve. And so, probably in like May or June, I reached back out
Yeah.
to the man and said, like, okay, I'll come. Like, I'll come
Yeah.
for a year and just kind of see what happens. And so that's how I originally got
Mhm.
over to Uganda. I said I was going to take a gap year
Right.
between high school and college. I got over to Uganda and again, just like dove head first. I was teaching kindergarten in a little classroom, preschool slash kindergarten.
Mhm.
A ton of kids would come from the community because this organization had opened it up to where it was free
Right.
for
Right.
community children. So they would come, and
Amazing.
in the morning, I would just kind of teach in the classroom there, how to write letters and how to count. It was super fun. And then in the afternoon, I was just with the kids that lived at the orphanage and getting
Mhm.
to know them, getting to know their
Wow.
stories. And as I got to know them, they would start talking about their parents and their
Mhm.
grandparents and their aunts and uncles. And as it turned out, I mean, I was completely naive to this as an American. I just assumed that, we all have stereotypes and things
Yes.
that we think are accurate that aren't. I mean, I just assumed
100%.
that the kids that lived in the orphanage that their parents had probably died. And as it turns out, a lot of them hadn't. They
Mhm.
were at the orphanage because their parents were not able to afford their schooling or their food or their medical care. And so
Right.
parents saw the orphanage as a place, as an opportunity, as a place where they could send their
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
to have a better life. And so they were sending them there out of love, believing
Yeah.
that it was
A better
a good
place.
opportunity. In
Yeah.
Uganda, school is not free. You have to pay school fees. And so, especially in the area where we were in, a lot of the people were surviving by farming. They were growing their food and eating their
Yeah.
food. They were fetching
Yeah.
their water and using their
Mhm.
water and drinking their water. So they didn't have, there wasn't a ton of cash being
Right.
exchanged. Not a lot of them worked for actual money.
Right.
And so, even like to get to 3 times a year, there's a new school. There's 3 terms in the Ugandan
Okay.
school system. And so 3 times a year, even just to have the equivalent of 50 to $100 was a huge challenge for these
Right.
families. And then to think of
Yeah.
having multiple children,
Right.
they weren't able to send their kids to school. And so I just kind of came to realize that a lot of parents were sending their kids to live in institutions
Mhm.
just because of poverty, and that didn't sit well with me.
Mhm.
And so it so happened that there was a grandmother in the community that I had gotten to know. Her twins had been coming to the little free kindergarten program, and
Right.
she was just lamenting that she was not going to be able to
Mhm.
send them on to the next level of school. She wasn't
Right.
going to be able to pay for it. And so she was
Yeah.
talking about actually bringing the twins to live at the orphanage. And I just looked at her one afternoon and said, "Hey, if I could figure out how to help you pay
Right.
for the twins to go to first grade, like,
Yeah.
would you keep them at
Yeah.
home?" Um, And she started to cry and
Oh
she
my
said, of
goodness. Of
course, I want
course.
to keep these kids at home. I
Yeah.
want to raise my grandkids. Like I promised my daughter that I would take
Yeah.
care of them.
Yeah.
I feel like I can't offer them
Right.
what they need. So, I called my
Right.
mom and I was like, Mom, we need like $200. Come on.
She's like,
And
okay.
yeah, and that's how Amazima started.
Right.
So Amazima is the organization that I founded.
Hmm.
It was really just a story of one step at a time, one yes at a time,
Yeah.
one little step of obedience at a time.
Yeah.
People attribute to me a lot like, oh, you're so visionary and you had this big dream. And I kind of laugh at that because I think I'm a dreamer, but also I didn't really have a big
Right.
plan. I didn't set out to start an organization. I just started sending these two kids to school. And
Yeah.
then my parents started telling their friends here in the Nashville area, and friends would say, like, oh,
Right.
okay, cool. I could give her a little bit of
Yeah.
money to
Yeah.
help out. And so then I sent four kids to school and then 10. And then I had two women who helped me co-teach in the classroom, two
Yeah.
Ugandan women who also helped with
Yeah.
translation, and they have become good friends of mine. And so they started pointing out to me other families in the
Right.
community whose
Yeah.
children weren't able to go to school and
Yeah.
who needed some financial assistance and maybe who
Yeah.
needed medical assistance. And so just as I got to know this community and be friends with a lot of the families, and as friends from the United States were saying,
Mm.
oh, I could give to help you. Within the first year that I had lived in Uganda, I was paying for about 40 children to
Wow.
go
That's
to
a lot
school.
from two to
So, yeah,
40.
yeah. And so, really, just kind of by the time my year was wrapping up in Uganda, really just kind of sensed like, oh, this is going to be my life's work. Like, this is
Wow.
the path that God has me on. And so that's kind of the story of founding Amazima. The
Yeah.
word about people who are listening who haven't heard that word before are probably
Yeah.
like, what does she
Yeah.
keep saying? In the Luganda language, it means truth. And so my heart was just, I felt like God impressed it on my heart really early. Um, that yes, we want to help people get out of poverty. We want to see them have their needs met. We want to see them go to school. We want to see them have nutritious food. We want to have
Yeah.
medical care
Yeah.
available to them. But at the end of the day, if they don't know the truth of Jesus, it's just made a temporary
Yes.
impact. And I wanted my life to make an eternal impact. And so
Yeah.
started gathering the kids and the parents
Yeah.
together on Friday evenings for Bible studies and just like really felt like through having access to education and food
Yeah.
and medical care, I wanted them to also have access to the gospel. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, just that the verse in John that says, you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. Just
Hmm.
really wanted them to know the truth of the gospel and the truth
Yeah.
of Jesus who loved them and
Yeah.
died for them. So that's where the name Amazima comes from. And now, I mean, fast forward, this is crazy. This was almost 20 years ago.
It's
We're
almost
coming
20 years.
yeah, we're coming up on
Oh,
2000. Yep. We're coming up on 18 and a
yeah.
half-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, whoa,
That's
that's crazy.
crazy.
Yeah, I know, I know. So fast forward all these years later, we've got multiple schools in
Hmm.
that area that we built. We really wanted to see
It's really expanded, right? Like,
as a vehicle for
yeah.
discipleship. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
we really hand select all our staff
Mm.
to make sure that the children who come into our schools are being not just taught, but also
Right.
discipled and mentored
Right.
and pointed to Jesus. So we have a primary school and a secondary school. We've got about 400 children at each campus.
Yeah.
Now we have kids going off to university.
That is just beautiful. I love
A
that.
giant staff. We've got about 300 people on staff. So it's just been really, really cool to watch God kind of
Yes.
organically grow it.
Yeah.
My husband and I lived in Uganda
Mm.
for about 15. So I was there for about 15 years.
Right.
Um,
Before you
met
came back here.
and then we've been back in the States
Yeah.
for about 3 years now, but
Yeah.
I still stay really involved in the fundraising and
Right.
development part
Yes.
of Amazima.
And of course you go back. Of course you go back.
Yes, yes. We go back a couple times a year, so
Yeah.
I'm super grateful for that.
Wow, that's amazing. I think, think back to your high school self and now and think, okay, you always had missions on your heart and Jesus was working on you and you didn't even understand really what that meant. but your mom, being your mom, an amazing mom, was listening to also God at the same time and put you guys together for that moment. And not even knowing where Uganda was or any of the details, which, by the way, when you read the books to the listeners, you will fall in love with Uganda. Just the way you describe it is just,
Oh,
it's
good.
beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. I've never been, but I do. My mom and dad were missionaries. My grandparents were missionaries in Africa, in Zambia area. But I've never gone. But my husband and I have always talked about the fact that we might go there and visit a friend of
You
ours that
have
we
to
haven't.
go.
I
It's
know
so
it's really hard.
beautiful.
It's got like you really do have to take 2 or 3 weeks to go. So
It's hard. You need a chunk of time.
you need a chunk of time. So we're getting there. We're getting there. But what I love is that your heart was just so ready for God to do some amazing things. So when you think about your 18-year-old self until now, and look what God has done with your yes and your faithful yes. And I really believe that your not only the two books that you first wrote, but these the next two were 2023, right? Both
Yeah.
in 2023, which I kind
Yeah.
of, how did she do two in the 2023?
I didn't. I wrote them at separate times. It
But they
both
all,
came out
yeah.
close together. Yeah.
But so much of your heart of discipleship and mentoring and walking alongside of women, it just really it just abounds in both of the books, and they're so beautiful. And I know that there's so many chapters I could really talk about, but if we could just talk a little bit about Safe All Along. And I just before we talk about that though, I wanted to ask you the initial writing journey. You probably never thought of yourself as, okay, I'm just going to go to Africa and write a book and I'm going to start a ministry. Like you didn't go there thinking those things, right? It's like God goes,
No.
surprise, surprise, something's coming. So what was a little bit of your writing journey to the first book? And then we'll start talking a little bit more about Safe All Along and your devotional.
Sure. Yeah, I've always loved writing. I love just communication.
Mm.
And so I actually was not intending to write a book. I was keeping a blog. It was back in the day when blogs were
Yes,
really big time. And I was just keeping a blog as a way really to keep in touch with people
yeah,
from the United States who had, I had given me a little bit of money to kind of sustain me for that year.
makes sense
For
for sure.
parents, family members, things like that. So I
Mhm.
started writing. Um, just writing the stories of what I was doing in everyday life on my blog. And it just really, it grew a really big following really fast. And I
Mm.
had a lot of people just super interested in my blog. So probably after my first 2 years in Uganda, I had
Mm.
publishers starting to come to me and
Right,
saying like, oh, can we turn this into a book? Would you want
right.
to do a book? Can you turn it into a book? And I was like 20. So I was like,
Uh,
sure, yeah, awesome. I love it. I had no idea.
what was coming?
It's probably God's mercy that I had no idea because
Right.
I might not have done it. Honestly, like I had no idea. It sold, I think, close to 500,000 copies.
It was a bit of a New York Times
It
bestseller.
did. It did really well.
Yeah,
That was a surprise to me more than it
yeah,
was, just
yeah.
as much as anyone. I
Yeah.
had no idea.
Yeah.
It's obviously been tremendously impactful for our
Hmm.
ministry.
Yeah.
And to get the word out. But then it's funny. It is funny because I go back to that book and when I read parts of it, I feel like, I sound so young. I'm sure any of us go back to our 20-year-old
Yeah.
selves and are like, oh, you
Yes.
thought you knew some things. But
But that's okay. That's part of our, that's growth.
right,
That's
yeah,
our
yeah.
journey.
God can use anything.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first venture into
Yeah.
publishing. And then I kept writing just in journals, and it was probably 7 years before I
Yeah.
really felt the nudge from
Mm.
God to say, like, hey, what I've been doing in your life for the last many years is for
Yeah.
more than just you. And I was like, oh, am I gonna publish again? I don't
Okay, I'm not
know.
sure.
But then Daring to Hope, my second book was really it was a very healing book for me to
Mm.
write. I think I had really kind of gone back to some really challenging
Mm.
moments in my
Hmm.
journey over it was, probably the first 8 to 10 years of my time in
Yeah.
Uganda. I got to write those out and really process them. And so
Yeah.
that book might be, I don't know, it's hard to have a favorite. That one might be my favorite though, just because it felt like such an outpouring of
Yes.
my
It
of
really
my
is.
yeah.
And the stories that you share, and I actually was thinking about this when I was putting some of the questions together, was that the place that you created, your home, was really a safe haven. And
Mm.
the way that you just opened your doors to anyone that needed help. And that's why I'm just encouraging people, they need to get out and have these books in their library and then share with people, because you just set this example of God can use anyone, anywhere, anytime. He's just looking for
Yes.
your yes, right? And you didn't plan these things, but God knew ahead of time, and you were able to walk into it and with Him. And you share the stories of walking with people that are in suffering and pain, poverty, and you do it with grace and love. And was it easy? No. And that's what I love too. But you share so openly and honestly about the trials and the tribulations that you walked through to get you to that next place. And I mean, there's so many stories that you really have to just kind of read them and close the book and say, okay, I just need a minute. Like even when maybe I'll even just talk about it quickly now, but when Abigail, that you talk about, that was a dear friend of yours who had to move away, and the struggles that she had. And then I just was reading it. It was so heartfelt to me because you had such a precious friendship with her. And I'm not sure how Abigail, like how it all started, but just how she wanted you to be there and to visit them, and just the struggles that she went through. But the impact, maybe you want to comment a little bit about, because it was a very impactful story for me. Just what was that impact that Abigail had on you that you wrote about in Safe All Along?
Well, she just had such a tremendous faith. So she was a longtime friend. We'd been doing Bible studies together for a very long time. She
Yeah.
was one of the few people in a Bible study that I led that also spoke English. And so she would translate for me. And then
Mm,
slowly over the years, she just started leading the Bible study herself. And I was just
it's
a
amazing.
participant. But she felt really called to go back to her home in Karamoja, which is north in Uganda, pretty far from where we were, and she was just living in like the most remote place. And I think you're referencing once I was gonna go there with my
Yes.
kids, and she said, well, you can't come, it would be too dangerous for your kids. And I was like, you
Yes.
are living there with your
I
kids.
know. I was so shocked when she said that, 'cause I'm like, well, but you're there. You chose to
Right.
go to this
And
place.
she just, I mean, it was just another testimony of it's the same when I look back at the stories in Daring to Hope. Some of those stories, I read them now and I'm like, crazy. What were you doing? But when
Yeah.
God calls you to something or he
Mhm.
asks something of you and you know that you're walking with him, I think you just have this greater confidence that makes you
Mhm.
so bold. And so Abigail is so bold. She is living
Yes.
in a dangerous place and
Yes.
sitting there with her family, and she's doing it because she so badly wants her native people to know the gospel. There's a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
idol worship going on
Yeah.
up there, and she brings people to her home for
Yeah.
Bible studies. She brings kids to her home and teaches them to
Amazing.
read so that they can
Wow.
read the Word of God. I mean, she's just incredible. She's turned her entire home and life into a ministry where God is glorified, and she's
Yeah.
not afraid.
That's
But I think she's
amazing.
not afraid because she knows that she's doing what he's asked of
Yeah.
her.
Yeah. Oh, and it's so bold, but she went knowing that God had called her, and she went with a confidence like you talked about, and she doesn't have to fear because God is going before her. But her faith was just really impactful for me, and I loved the endearing friendship that you had, or that you still have probably. Yeah, it was very impactful for me just to hear her willingness to go. And she said something like, if I don't go, then who's going to tell them? Who's going to do
Right.
it? And that
Right.
to me is like going back to you and your initial calling too is, well, what if I leave? I think I should stay. Like, who is going to do this? Who is going to provide funds for these kids to go to school, or the food or the uniform or medicine or whatever? And it's that first scary yes, right? Yeah. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Safe All Along. And I have a quote in here that I wanted to read and talk a little bit about it. And it kind of coincides with the story that you opened up with at the beginning, a little bit of a scary story. So I just want to read this quote and then we'll talk a little bit about that. So you said here, but I imagine that for God, it looks a whole lot more like what I saw standing on the edge of the riverbank with Benji, realizing that we had always been safe. There had been so many different places to get out. God sees the whole picture, all the twists and turns, the places where the rapids swirl, the places of calm where we could swim lazily, the islands and tree branches that provide a place to rest. and the people along the way who provide encouragement. He sees the whole trajectory of our lives, and he sees all that he is doing in each situation, working all things for good, even in the midst of something that doesn't look good. And I had to doggy ear that and underline it in the book because we all have those things in our lives where we're not feeling safe. We're feeling out of control. And as you know, more than ever today, the world is in upheaval. There's always something going on that's sad or hard or chaotic. And what this book does with your title, it brings you to safety in the arms of the Heavenly Father. And that's what I find that is just beautifully woven throughout your entire book of all of the different titles. And it just touches the heart of the reader in a special way. So, reading this quote from you, you might want to do a little bit of the backstory. So, I wondered if you could
Sure.
share that little, the experience that you share in the book.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a vivid, I love when God gives us a really vivid moment or a
Yes.
really vivid
Yeah.
analogy. So our family had been probably from like 2019 until 2023. We were just kind of, we were in a really, not kind of, we were in a really hard season. We just had a lot going on. We had
Yeah.
a couple medical diagnoses with our kids. We
Mhm.
had a lot of back and forth from Uganda to the
Mhm.
United States, which ultimately led to us moving here. We were devastated to move back to the United States, but we really felt like it
Mhm.
was God's next right step for us. In the middle of that was the pandemic. And so then, like, travel was really hard. There
Yeah.
were just so many things going on. But I
Yeah.
would have said up until that point, 2019 was probably the hardest year of my
Mm.
life. It had just been
Mhm.
chaotic and challenging for our family in
Yeah.
so many ways. And it had just put me in this spiral
Yeah.
of anxiety,
Right.
this like hole that I felt like I could not claw my way out of, really. And then toward the very end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, all our kids were home, which was really sweet because some of them had
Yeah.
already started going to university in the United
Oh,
States.
wow.
Some of our kids had gotten to come home. They actually got to come home that whole semester. Okay, so it must have been 2020.
Could have
Anyway,
been,
they'd been
yeah,
home for an extended
around
period
there.
of time. We got to go on this little family getaway. And so we were camping near the river, and where we lived in Uganda was right next to the Nile River. So just again, so gorgeous. And we've always swam in the river. The kids grew
Mhm.
up swimming in it. It was one of our favorite pastimes was to
Yeah.
paddleboard and
Yeah.
kayak and hop. And on this particular day, my daughter and I got in and were swimming and essentially got kind of stuck in a rapid. And it started pulling on us and it started
So
taking us
scary.
down the river. It was so scary. It was like
Awesome.
a movie
Yeah.
scene. Like, still, when I think about it, I'm like, I can't believe that happened. I mean, we had on life jackets, but
But
it was
still,
still, it was still terrifying.
yes.
It was totally unexpected. I mean, we were
Mhm.
both really strong swimmers, but it
Yeah.
started I mean, the river is powerful, and it started
Mm.
rapidly carrying us away from where
Right.
the rest of our family
From
was
safety.
on the shore.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
so I remember like swimming so hard
Mhm.
against the current, trying like with one hand to reach out for my daughter. It was an adult daughter. She was big, but trying to
Yeah.
with
Of
one hand reach out for my
course.
daughter and another hand like reach
Yeah.
something on the shore that could
Yeah.
anchor us.
Yeah.
And I was eventually able to grab onto a tree branch and climb my way out. But as I did that, I couldn't reach my daughter. I watched her go around the corner to where I
That
couldn't
is
see
just
her
such an
anymore. Oh,
awful feeling.
I'm terrified, like even just thinking about it. And I know
Mhm.
that she's fine. And so
Yeah.
I'm sitting there on a rock and I'm so upset. And I'm, of course, imagining
Yeah.
the worst
The
case
worst
scenario.
case
And I'm
scenario.
praying and I'm crying out to God and I'm like trying to wave my hands at my kids and my husband who are like
Yeah.
back further up. And then I have no idea how long I sat there. Of course, it felt like forever. I'm sure it was
Forever.
only a few minutes. But, I heard her footsteps
Wow.
coming from the other direction. So I could see my husband and my kids
Yeah.
like starting to make their way
Yeah.
over to see if I was okay. But I heard her footsteps coming from the other
It's
direction and
crazy.
saw her and just,
Yeah.
I'm like squeezing her
You're
and
like, you're
screaming and like,
here.
oh my gosh, you're okay.
Yes.
All that to say, when my husband finally got to me, I was like
I would
trying to
have been a
kiss
mess.
I
A
was like,
mess.
I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. I'm so sorry. I thought we lost her.
Oh.
And he was I was like, were you so worried? And he was very nonchalant. He was like, no, I figured you guys would be okay. Like you
Like,
would get out. It
okay.
would just be like maybe a long journey back to camp. I was
Right.
like, okay. But then later he said, hey, I want to show you something. And so this is where this quote is from, is he
Mm,
took me up a little bit higher on the riverbank.
mhm,
And up on this hill, you could look out and see the
mhm.
river and just see it so clearly and
Right.
all it's like the winding path, and
Right.
there was a little island that we maybe could have swim over
Right.
to, and there were a couple little coves where we could
Mhm.
have gotten out. Like he was right, there were
Yes.
plenty of places up ahead
Right.
to get to safety, but when you're eye level
You don't
in
see
the
it.
waves, I couldn't see
No.
anything. All I could
No.
see was the waves and that my daughter
Yeah.
was gone. And it was just, I felt these words drop into my spirit. You were safe all along.
Mm,
And I just started thinking about the last year or two of our lives
mm,
and how chaotic it had been and
right.
how tumultuous it had
Yeah.
felt, how many different kind of emergencies we were fielding, both in
Right.
our family and externally in ministry, just like walking
Yeah.
with so many people in suffering. And I thought of how anxious I had been
Mhm.
because my perspective had been like it was in the
Yeah.
water, like I could
Yes.
only see this little part. And then I remember thinking, oh, from God's perspective,
Right.
it looks like it does up here, where He can see the whole trajectory of
Right.
our lives. He sees where it's going to be really hard, and
Hmm.
He's going to be with us in that.
Yeah.
And then He sees
Yeah.
where He's going to give us these pockets of rest and joy, and
Yeah.
the seasons that just feel like, oh, wow, relief. And He's going to be with us in that. And if I had known, I just kept thinking, if I had known how safe we were,
Right.
that would have been fun. Like
Totally
it
would
would
have
have
been
been
fun.
fun to be like flying down the river if I had known for sure
Right.
I'm going to get out of here safe. And similarly with life, right? Like if
Hmm.
we could really
Hmm.
have the deep trust
Yes.
that it is all going to be okay because
Yeah.
God is with me here
Yeah.
and I'm headed to eternity where I'm safe
Yes.
with him. Like I say that, I
Yeah.
intellectually know
Yeah.
it, but I don't always live
No.
that way. And like Jesus, so the premise of this book is that Jesus promises us peace.
Yeah.
Even before he goes to the cross, he says, "My peace
Hmm.
leave you."
Yes.
And so if he says that he gives us peace, how come I don't feel
You're
peace
like,
as
I'm
a
waiting.
believer? Right? And we're so, we're looking in all the wrong places. We think,
Yeah.
oh, if I just go on this vacation or I just clear a day in my schedule or I just get
Mm,
extra sleep, like if
right.
this happens, or how often do I say like, oh, this is a really busy season, but like in March things will slow down, and then here
It
we are
doesn't
in
slow down.
March, and I'm like, why do I always
No.
say that?
No. It does.
But it's not, our peace isn't found in
No.
something tangible
Yeah.
that we can have on this earth. Our peace is found in Jesus
Hmm.
and trust and the belief and the hope that He is
Yeah.
with us right here.
Yes.
He is with us
Hmm.
in eternity, and in Him we are safe. And
Yeah.
like you said, like the waters rage around us, and it seems like all the more increasingly, right? There is so much
Hmm.
turmoil in our world, both
So
on a
much.
personal level and a global level.
Hmm.
But we, as people who know Jesus,
Hmm.
get to be the people of peace. We get to be the
Yes.
steady people. We get to be the people of assurance. We get to be
Yeah.
the people of joy because we have something
Hmm.
unshakable. We have a
Yep.
God that sees the big picture
Yes.
even when we don't. And so I began writing the book Safe All Along, kind of out of that premise.
Mm-hmm.
I signed the contract to write it 3 months before we unexpectedly moved to the United
Oh
States.
boy.
Our family was in the United States on a 3-week trip
Wow.
to visit friends and family.
Yeah.
And just because of several different things that were going on,
Yeah.
some medical stuff with one of our kids, and also the pandemic stuff was
Yeah.
still like
Still going
sporadic
on.
opening and closing things. And
Hmm.
we just
Hmm.
thought, oh, we might get home to Uganda and not be able to get back here for a while.
Right.
So on 3-week trip, we actually decided to stay.
Yeah.
And we originally said, let's stay 6 months and see. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then we bumped it to a year. And then ultimately, I mean, it was really sweet of the Lord that my ministry had continued to grow
Right.
and flourish in Uganda under
Just
Ugandan
so
leadership.
beautiful how God did, how
And
he's done that.
yes, the church that we were a part of, that my husband was helping to
Mhm.
pastor, was really growing and thriving under
Mhm.
other leadership. And so, um, yeah, we found ourselves here, but it was so, that book is so special to me because
Mhm.
God gave me a message
Mhm.
that I thought I believed, but then I then had to live
Yes. Yeah.
because I found myself here
Yeah.
in the United States and felt more frazzled and more chaotic and more anxious
Of
than I'd ever
course.
been my whole
Yeah.
life. And here I
Isn't it
am
crazy?
writing this book about like
Yeah.
how to walk in the peace of God. And
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah. You're like,
I
I think
can't.
I need that piece right now. Even
Right.
I'm writing
So,
about it. It's like the head to heart. And it's
yes.
almost like God puts you through these things because he knows how badly you need it. And he knows you're going to get there. But he also knows all the hills and valleys in between. But he gave you a message and he was going to get that out and get that communicated through your book. And as hard as it was, and the time span that you had, you did it. And you give all the glory to God for sure. I
Yes.
know he worked through you to do this, but because it was such a strong message, there's no way he was going to have you stop.
Well, yeah, I was living it as I was writing it. So I
Yeah,
felt like that one was as much for me as it was for the reader. It was the message I needed too.
absolutely. But you know what I love too? You share about the title Pulled Apart. I thought was so appropriate, and I was really drawn to that when I was going over this book again, because I feel like so many of us today are feeling pulled apart.
Mhm.
All the division that's going on throughout the different countries in the world and everything that's happening today. But what I love is that you talk about your anxiety and the things that you were anxious about that you've referred to with the move and family members and all these different things. And you talk, and you said this here in the chapter, our flesh always wants to keep pushing through, but our hearts need to rest in our Father. And then you go
Mhm.
on to talk a little bit about how you were feeling anxious and defeated and exhausted, and you were worried, and you were telling somebody finally that this is what was happening. And what I think a lot of our listeners would be agreeing with, it's hard to get to that point of telling somebody. You're holding it all in, you're keeping it together. You're a mom, you're a wife, you're in ministry, you're writing books, you're speaking, you're doing all these things. And then all of a sudden you're like, I'm up to, I can't do this anymore. So for somebody that's listening today that might be feeling they're in that moment, what brought you to the place of being able to share with your
Mhm.
friend? And then I love what she said. When she said, she put her hand on your knee and she said, I'm so thankful you said that. And it opened up that, oh, I'm not the only one. Like it's just,
Right.
it's such a beautiful moment in the book. Because again, it's the importance of friendship and community, and having that space to be able to do that. So what brought you to that point? And then what would you say to somebody today, maybe that is really struggling with
Mhm.
being pulled apart and anxious and defeated?
Well, I mean, it's the beauty of vulnerability in
Mm.
community, right? And so I
Yeah.
do think I'm not sure what brought me to the point
Mm.
where I was willing to share other than I just thought like you said, like I am up to here.
Mm.
I am, I look like I have things together on the outside, but internally, I'm
Mhm.
feeling so anxious and
Yeah.
so distracted and just like I cannot take one more thing and
Right.
so tired. And yeah, when I shared with her, she was like, "Oh my gosh, I've been feeling that way too." And
Yeah.
then we were able to encourage with each other and pray
Yeah.
with each other and relate to each other and not feel alone. And I think so many of us can feel
Yeah.
so alone in our
Mhm.
emotions and in our struggle. And God
Yeah.
didn't design us for that. And I think just for somebody who is struggling, I would encourage them to find a safe person or a couple safe people where they can share because you might be surprised to find out that other people are
Yes.
struggling in the same way as you. And we're all so afraid to be the first one to
Yes.
say it, but sometimes when you go first, you open
Mhm.
the doors for other people to be vulnerable and
Absolutely.
experience healing and encouragement too. And like
Yes.
beauty of the body of Christ, and that's the beauty of what God does, is that He
Mhm.
allows us, even in our struggles, to
Yeah.
be an encouragement to others. And it might not be that we have any encouraging words at the moment or that we're on the
Right.
other side of it. Sometimes just our encouragement is letting others know, like, hey, you're not alone. You're
Yeah.
not the only person who feels that way.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
let's figure out what we can do about it. Let's
Yeah.
figure out how we can encourage each other.
Yeah. Some of my most meaningful moments are with friends in that one-on-one situation where you're sharing things and you're being vulnerable and then you're just crying or you end up laughing and then you just pray together and it just creates this incredible bond. And then you're all in and then you're texting each other and I love having that feeling of I don't even have to say what I need. I just say, can you just pray? And
Hmm.
they just start praying. And
Yeah.
so, anyone who's listening today, I would encourage you to find that group, really pray about it, and get into the church and into community and find that group because then you will have that person sitting across from you, putting their hand on your knee saying, me too. Like, thank you for sharing, right? And that is so important to overcoming these barriers of, exhaustion or anxiety or depression. And as women, we battle these things. These happen, and we have our really, really dark days. And like you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's just you're not saying anything. You're just there. You're just there with them, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's great encouragement for them today. I think just wanted to talk a little bit about our faithful God. And you talk actually one of the chapters in Safe All Along, you talk a little bit about what started the beginnings of this 52-week devotional. So I'd love it if you just share briefly about um, a little bit of that and how you got to this to writing a devotional from writing 3 books to going into a devotional. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. I wrote the devotional I guess like before I wrote Safe All Along, but I was writing it for myself and for my family. Um I had been kind of in a season, I think we all have these. It was before Safe All Along, it was before all the anxiety stuff, but I
Mhm,
was just kind
mhm.
of feeling spiritually like blah, like, okay, I know what God's word
Yeah.
says. I'm going through the motions. I'm
Yeah.
reading my Bible. I'm serving my community, but just kind of feeling dry. And I was
Mm,
just trying to think of something that would kind of spark a little bit more of a feeling, I guess, in my faith journey and in my spiritual walk. And I think some of what God taught me in that is that like He's present when I feel Him and He's present when I don't. And so some of it really is just keep coming back to me. Just
yeah.
keep to the word. I'm still
Beautiful.
available to meet with you. My
Yeah.
faith
Yeah.
isn't based on my feelings and my emotions. My emotions are a huge and valid and important part of
Mm,
me. I get to
mhm.
bring those to God and talk to God about them. But just because I'm not having this felt experience doesn't
Mm,
mean that God has changed. It doesn't
right.
mean that He's absent. And so I was just looking for something. I was picking up different devotionals. I was trying to find something that really resonated. And my
Mhm.
husband suggested the McChain reading plan, which is like this very, very old reading plan where
Mhm.
you're going through
Mhm.
4 books of the Bible. So you're going through 2 Old Testament books and 2 New Testament books at the same
Yeah.
time. And as I started going through, and I had just been praying, like, God, make your word come alive to me.
Mm,
Like, I want it to be new. And I think you can. I think the longer you've walked with the Lord, you can start to approach scripture and feel like, oh, I know I'm supposed to be reading this, but I feel like I've
of
already
course.
read the story, right? And so I was
Yeah.
just asking, like, God, give me new eyes to
Yeah.
see. Like, no, your word says that your
Yeah.
word is living and
Yeah.
active. Like, I
Mm,
want to perceive it like that. And as I was going through these different books of the Bible, it was
mm,
so fascinating to me that God in the Old Testament and God in the Psalms and God in the Gospels and
mhm.
God in the letters, He was the same. And it
Mhm.
felt like so often an attribute of His character
Right.
would jump off the page
Yeah.
as if these readings had been specifically designed and curated to go together, but they hadn't. They're just like in order. Like you
Yeah.
start at
Yeah.
Genesis 1
Yeah.
in Matthew 1, and
Mhm.
you're going through them in
Yeah.
order. They haven't been selected by anybody but God.
Yeah.
Go together or to be like based on a theme, but I would just see like God's goodness, God's goodness, God's
Yeah.
goodness, God's goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, God's wisdom, God's wisdom,
Right.
God's wisdom, God's provision, God's
Yeah.
provision, God's provision. And so
Oh, great.
I was so encouraged. It felt like the word
Hmm.
was coming alive to me and God was showing me, look, I've always been the
Hmm.
same. I always will be the same. I'm the same God for you. And so I
Yeah.
started doing it with my kids and just writing down my reflections every day of what God was showing me. And I made it for my family. And then I started doing it with a couple women from my church. And
Mhm.
then it was actually a really good friend of mine was like, you need to publish this.
I agree.
So that was like a really fun one to write because again, I was writing it in real time as it was happening. Like I wrote
Yeah.
it once a week, every week for the course of the
Right.
year before I ended up publishing it. And so it was just
Yeah.
a really sweet journey that God had me on just to say like the word is a show of my faithfulness.
I
This
love
is who
that.
I was, this is who I am, this is who I'm always going to be and you
Yeah.
can always come back
Yeah.
to this. Always and our seasons change and our
Mhm.
life circumstances
Yes,
change and
they
like
do.
he's God, he
Yeah.
doesn't
Yes. Thank
change.
goodness.
Yes.
Well, I think that's what's so evident in the devotional is that it comes from a place that you walked through and that you journeyed it and you heard what God was saying to you through specific passages. And I love how the format of the days and then you talk about a character of God and how it's just a really beautiful devotional and it's very heartfelt. And you can tell that you didn't just write it and then put it away and say, I hope people do it. You did it. You did it. You lived it. And that makes it so real and meaningful when you pick up the book and you read through the what you do share. So thank you for doing it. It's been really neat.
Oh,
That's
thank
great.
you.
Actually, I do have a spring giveaway coming up that I'm going to
Oh,
do.
yay.
So I'm actually going to be I'll do these two books, Safe All Along and Our Faithful God. So stay tuned, everybody, because I'm going to be doing I love doing little giveaways. So this will be a fun one. I'll add it to the package. Yeah. So um, before we finish today, I wanted to ask you a quick question about homeschooling. I'm a homeschooler too. I actually
Okay.
just officially retired though. My fifth child she just went into grade 9 at the local Christian high school.
Wow.
So I'm in a totally different space in my life. For like 17, 18 years, I've been a homeschooling mom. And it's like, okay, identity. It's like getting my days straight. Look, what does God want me to do? And walking in His will. And so, what led you initially to actually do the homeschooling? Yes, like Lord, I'm gonna do it. Okay.
Right. So, the majority of my kids are adopted, and a lot of them were adopted when they were quite a bit older and they didn't have a very solid foundation of
Okay.
education. And so,
Yeah.
it was part necessity and it was
Mhm.
part that the school days were super long, and I
Yeah.
just wanted to be with them more. I mean, a lot of stuff with attachment. I wanted a lot more time with them.
Yeah.
And a lot of them just weren't really reading very proficiently. And
Mhm.
so,
Mhm.
I pulled them out of school and started teaching them at home. And I also
Yeah.
had a tutor that would come
Yes.
and help me and just
That's
really
great.
I thought I would only do it for a couple years because
Mhm.
I really wanted to work on solid attachment in our home
Mhm.
and really solid reading for them. And then honestly, I loved it.
Yeah.
Like I was dreading starting because I was not homeschooled. I didn't really grow up knowing anybody who was
Yeah.
homeschooled. But I ended up just really, really loving
Awesome.
the time at home with my
Yeah.
kids. And
Very
so
special.
most of my kids went until some of them started going to more mainstream schools in like seventh, eighth,
Hmm.
ninth grade, like anywhere
Right
in that
around
range.
there.
They
Yeah.
started going to
Yeah.
schools in our area. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm still homeschooling.
Great.
I'm homeschooling high schoolers for the first time.
Wow. That's a
I've
big
never
journey.
done that before, but they both wanted to still be
Good.
homeschooled. And
Look,
so,
okay.
I mean, I was like, okay, great.
They're like, I'll try. Let's do
And
it.
then I've got two little guys. I got a kindergartner and a third grader right now, and
Wow. I love
lots of
that.
fun. I mean, I really love, I think it's not for everybody, but
No.
me, I really love the culture
Yeah.
that it creates in our home. And I
Yeah.
love being able to be the primary person who
Yeah.
is discipling
I
my
get it.
kids, who gets to see them throughout the day and be excited about the things that
Yeah.
they're excited about. I do think sometimes, like, when my littlest is no longer homeschooled, I will have been homeschooling for like 20 plus years. I really won't know what to do with myself. So I might be
I
giving you a call in my identity crisis because I just can't even. I
yeah.
we go to a once a week tutorial
Hmm.
with other homeschool
Yeah.
families, and they have like some fun elective
Yeah.
classes.
That's what I did too. Yeah. It's
We
hard.
briefly entertained the idea of going to a 2 week or a 2 day a week
Right.
tutorial this year. And I looked at my husband and I was like, I'll be so bored. And he was like, No, Katie, you will not be
No, you
bored.
won't be. No, you won't.
But I couldn't imagine like the 2 full days without them.
I know it's a very interesting journey and a very interesting place, but I see God's hand in how he brought me into homeschooling. And as I've been figuring out what is next and taking me out of the homeschooling. And I used to teach kindergarten as well before I started having kids and homeschooling. And so I've been going back into classrooms, going back into kindergarten classrooms in grade one and reading the book, my latest kids book. And just so I feel like God just kind of goes, I told you. I've got you. It's like you just need to trust me. You need to trust that I've got a plan, and he knows every season and every stage of our life. So and he knows that for you too. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
before we finish, what is next for you? Do you have
true.
any other, let's say, a book project or
Yeah, I am working on a book project slowly but surely. So if anybody who
writing?
sees it feels led to pray for me, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll have a book release in the fall of next year. It's one that I've
Amazing.
been working on
Awesome.
very slowly. And then I still get to stay really involved in stuff with Amazima and
Oh, that's
just
so great.
raising funds to expand our reach. And it's a really
Yeah.
exciting season of ministry because some of our students now that have come all the way through primary
Mm.
and secondary school are
Mhm.
going to university and they're getting their first jobs and
Wow.
just developing programs to help them flourish in the world and be the leaders that they were meant to be. I really do
Wow.
think that this next generation of young people
Mm.
in Uganda is on fire for Jesus, and
Amazing.
I am excited for the way that they're going to
Yeah.
change their country and
Yes.
the world. And so that's really exciting to be a
Yeah.
part of. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
other than that, I'll just be homeschooling and
That's
folding laundry, but not really. I mostly my laundry's unfolded. So
save that for the kids now.
yeah.
Well, that's really exciting. Katie, thank you so much for sharing your heart today, and for inviting us into your world through your books and your speaking and what you're doing. It's really a gift. So I want to thank you for being with us today. And I can't wait to share this episode. Thanks
Well,
so
thank
much.
you.
And I look forward to another conversation another time.